Today we're going to be working in Excel 2013 and looking at managing data. We're going to be doing a variety of things with our data. We're going to talk about freeze panes and why you might use that. Very useful tool, probably one of the tools that I use the most in Excel. We're going to deal with subtotals to be able to subtotal our data. We're then going to look at data validation to make sure that people are entering the right type of data into our spreadsheet. We're going to take a look at the if function. We're then going to take a simple look at pivot tables. Pivot tables is something we could really spend a couple weeks working on, but I want to introduce you to their concept. And then finally we're going to take a look at securing our worksheet. The topics we're going to be covering today actually come from multiple chapters throughout the book, so we're not going to open a file directly from the book. Instead, we're going to minimize our book and go to Class Files, IIT, Excel Data Files, Chapter 4, and in the Chapter 4 folder we're going to come down to the E36 Apply file. E36 Apply file. We'd like to get that file opened up. We're going to save this file to your Documents folder and go ahead and put it in a folder with today's date. With our file open, the first thing we want to talk about is something called freeze panes. Now, whenever you have a file similar to this file, which is rather lengthy, if you scroll down, there comes a point where you can no longer see the headings. So if I'm looking on a particular row, I don't know what this number represents because I don't see the heading up above. That's where freeze panes comes in. I'm going to scroll back up to the top of my document so that I can see the first few lines of the page. And what I want to do is I want to take these headings that appear on row 8 and I want them to stay on the page no matter where I am. Now, the biggest mistake people make when trying to make this happen is they select the headings themselves. This is actually not the first step in freezing the panes. What I actually want to do is select the cell directly below these heading lines. So in this particular case, I'm selecting cell A9. It's always going to be the A column, and this time it's going to be A9 because A9 is the first row below the title. With A9 selected, I'm going to go to the View tab. The View tab, this is going to affect the way we view our data on the spreadsheet. We're going to go to this Freeze Panes button right here and choose the option of Freeze Panes. What this does is it takes everything that was above my cursor, wherever my cursor was, and it freezes that information on the screen. So now you will see that as I scroll down in my data, that those first few rows, in this case all the way down to row 8, always stay on the screen no matter how far down I roll. So freeze panes. Repeating the steps. The first step is to click your cursor in the A column, specifically right under the cells you wish to freeze. With my cursor there, I go to View, Freeze Panes, and Freeze Panes. At this point, if I wanted to remove the Freeze Panes option, I could use the Unfreeze Panes. The next topic I want to look at is something called subtotals. And in this topic, what we're going to be dealing with is subtotaling parts of our data. For example, if I was asked to come up with the monthly revenue based on category. In other words, there's a snowboarding category here. I want to see what the monthly revenue was for all of the snowboard items. There's a skate category. I want to see what the monthly revenue would be for all of the skate items. Well, in order to do this, we need to first sort the data based on what I'm wanting to subtotal on. So since I want to subtotal based on the category, let's go ahead and click anywhere in this category list, and let's sort our data by going to Home, Sort and Filter, and Custom Sort. I'm going to sort based on the category. And while I don't have to do this, I'm going to go ahead and add a second level sort and sort by subcategory. That way all the subcategories are grouped together with my categories. I click OK. I will now see I've got a category called Backcountry. And that backcountry is broken down into a couple different categories. There's the backpack, there's the footwear, and there's the headgear. There's the light, there's the navigation, sleeping bag, tent, walking, and then we go to a new category. What I want to do right now is we're going to just sort all of the backcountry items, and I want to add all of the monthly revenues up for all of the back county and see what that totals up to. But then I want to do the same thing for camping. I want to add all the camping monthly revenue up and see what that amount comes out to be. Then I've got this heli-ski. I want to add up those subcategory items. The skate, which is one item, so we know that should be the 196,650 because there's only one item there. But then all the ski items, all right? So we want to add these up. Now when we're done with this, looking at the bottom here, I should see that my ski category, as an example, should come out to be 242,540. That's because I've just selected those particular items and looked at this quick auto sum that's done in the status bar to tell me what it is. But I don't want to have to rely on this. I want the numbers to automatically appear. Here's how we make this happen. With our cursor in the data, we're going to go to our Data tab on the ribbon, click on Data, and we're going to click on the subtotal. On this subtotal screen, a lot of people start looking immediately right here. And while this is important, we should start at the top and work down. This says at each change in, do I want to subtotal by type? No, I don't want to subtotal by type. I want to subtotal by category. So for each new, another way of saying this, for each new category, add, okay, I'm summing. What am I adding? I'm adding my monthly revenue. So for every new category, add the monthly revenue. That's pretty much it. I click OK. I'm going to scroll up, and I will see, I'm on row 62 right now, and on row 62 a new line has been added that wasn't there previously. It's called Backcountry Total, and the amount 1,542,336. That's all of my backcountry monthly revenues added together. Now I come down to the camping. I go to the bottom of the camping group, and I will see that there is now a camping total, which tells me there's $15,177.25 that were sold in the camping group. The heli-ski, the skate, and there's that ski total that we had looked at earlier. Now, what I may want to do with my subtotals is I don't want to see all the details. Now that I've got my subtotaled lines, I don't want to see all these detail lines. Well, that's what these numbers up here in the top left corner can do. You've got a 1, a 2, and a 3. We are currently in view 3, which displays all of the data. What I can do is I can click to view number 2, clicking on the number 2 here, and what that does is that hides the detail lines, showing just the subtotal lines. So here are my categories that are subtotaled and the amount that was sold. View number 1, which I rarely use, simply displays the grand total, the total amount of the sales for the entire amount. So I'm going to go back to view 2 where I can see the subtotaled items. Let's go ahead and go back to view 3 to show all the data once again. Now before we move on to another topic, I need to get rid of my subtotals. My subtotals are good for being able to do my calculation. I print those subtotals out, and then I often want to get rid of those subtotal lines and put things back the way they were with just the plain data. To get rid of my subtotal, I basically do the same steps that I did to create the subtotal. I go to the Data tab, click on Subtotal. There is a button in this bottom left corner that if a subtotal has already been created, I can choose Remove All. That will get rid of all the subtotals on the list. Now, what I'd like for you to do at this point is let's see if you can practice this on your own. What I'd like you to do is to subtotal based on the subcategory. I would like you to subtotal based on the subcategory of each item. I will give you a moment to work on this by yourself. We're going to click the subtotal button to make this happen, making sure, of course, that my cursor is in the data area first. Click on Subtotal. Instead of at each change in category, we're going to make this happen at each change in subcategory. We do want to add our monthly revenue. I click OK. At the bottom of my backpack subcategory, I now see my total for backpack. If I wish to collapse this down, I click on the number 2. Now I can see all the subcategories that are listed. Removing this item, we're going to go back to subtotal and we're going to remove all the subtotals. We're going to talk for a second about data validation. Data validation basically is where I tell Excel what is an acceptable item that can be entered into a cell and what's not an acceptable item that can be entered in a cell. Let me give an example. As I take a look at this spreadsheet, I've got 3 columns, Order 1, Order 2, and Order 3. Basically, these columns are going to have numbers typed into them, and they have to be positive numbers because you can't order a negative number of items. Also, we never are going to order more than 1,500 of any particular item. So what I want to do is I want to tell Excel to only allow entries of whole numbers between 0 and 1,500 is the maximum value. In order to make this happen, we're going to go ahead and select all of the items in the Order 1, Order 2, and Order 3 column. So I'm starting here in cell H9, selecting over to J9, and then down to the bottom of this particular range. That's going to bring me down to J134. With these items selected, we're going to go into our data validation. Data validation is found on the Data tab. About in the middle, you will see the button that says Data Validation. So we're going to click on the Data Validation option. The default setting is to allow you to enter anything into the cell. Well, we're going to change this. Instead of any value, we're going to change this to whole numbers, meaning I don't want to enter in a decimal value. The minimum number that can be entered is going to be 0, and the maximum number that can be entered is 1,500. So I'm entering in a whole number. I'm allowing a whole number to be entered between 0 and 1,500. Now, when this happens, I'm going to click OK. When this happens, if somebody types in an invalid number, so I'm going to come here, let's go to the top of this spreadsheet here. Let's go to cell I9, and let's say that I typed in the number -5. I'm going to type in a -5, and when I press the Enter key, I get a prompt that says the value I've entered is not valid. Okay, but notice it doesn't tell me what's wrong with it. In other words, the user who's trying to put this in doesn't know what's wrong. So what I can do, and I'm going to select this range again, what I can do is I can enter in a message so that when somebody enters an incorrect value, the pop-up will tell them what they're doing wrong. So let's go back into data validation. Here we see the settings that we put in before, whole number between 0 and 1,500. And what I'm going to do is I am going to go into the input message. This is where I can type a message to the user if they type data incorrectly. So where it says title, I'm going to say whole number. And for the input message, we're going to type in, you must enter a whole number between 0 and 1,500. I'm going to choose not to put the comma in there because you don't want the user to type in a comma. Repeating what I've done. For the title, I've put in whole number. For the input message, you must enter a whole number between 0 and 1,500. I click OK. So now when I click on a cell, I will see an input message explaining what I need to type into this cell. We're now going to revisit something called functions or formulas, and we're going to take a look at the if function. We briefly looked at this before. We're going to take a closer look at it. My goal is we're going to place a fourth order. Here we've got our starting inventory. We placed an order at one point, placed a second order, and then finally a third order. And we're getting ready to place a fourth order. So what I want to do is I want to determine which items I need to be ordering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new column. So I'm going to go to cell M8, and I'm going to type in order 4. After I've typed in order 4 and pressed the enter key, it did not take on the look of the rest of this row. So I want to make it look like the rest of the row. So I'm going to click on the monthly revenue and go to my Home tab, use my Format Painter to make order 4 look like the rest of the items in that row. Now, I wish to create my list that I need to place an order from. And the list is going to be relatively simple. If the ending inventory is less than 100 items, I wish to order that particular item. So I want to say yes for each item that is under 100 for ending inventory, I want it to say no if there is 100 or more. So we're going to create an if function to make this happen. So we're going to go to our AutoSum dropdown and use more functions. Alternatively, we could go to our Insert Function button and it brings us to the same place. I'm going to type in the word if and click Go. That should bring up my if function. I click OK. I'm simply moving this box down, in essence, so that the top of the box is kind of underlining the row that I'm working on. When creating an if function, I always have to create a logical test. The logical test is always going to be in the form of one object or cell is going to be equal to, greater than, or less than another object or cell. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to look to see if the ending inventory, so I'm going to click on ending inventory for the row I'm on, that's cell K9. I want to see if K9 is less than, so I'm going to type in the less than symbol, and the number that we said that we're looking for is 100. So I'm looking to see if the number in the ending inventory was less than 100. If that is true, then yes, we want to place the order. If it's false, then no, I don't want this item on order. So again, we set up our logical test. In this case, K9 less than 100. If it's true, yes, that item should be ordered. If it's false, no, that item is not ordered. I click OK. I take a quick look and I see that the ending inventory for this first item is 300, so it should not be ordered, and it is not being ordered. Now I'm going to just drag this down 3 rows for a second, because on the third row is an item that does indicate that it should be ordered, which is 24. It's less than the 100. And sure enough, copying the formula down does indicate a yes for this particular item, which means my formula is functioning as I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on the fill handle so that that copies all the way down to the bottom of my list, saying yes to the items that are less than 100 and no to the items that are 100 or greater. I want to go ahead and do a little bit of setup on my spreadsheet before we go into the next topic of pivot tables. One of the pieces of information that I would like to have on the spreadsheet for creating my pivot table is I want to know how many items were sold during this period of time. Well, the way that we can figure out how many actual items were sold is I've got the monthly revenue amount. All I need to do is take and divide that revenue amount by how much a single item cost. And that'll tell me how many items were sold. So let's do that. Let's go to cell N as in Nancy, N8, and type in items sold. To make it look like the others, I'm going to click on the order for, use my format painter, and click on items sold. And now I'm going to perform my calculation. So here I am in cell N9, and I'm going to start my formula with the equal sign. I'm going to take the monthly revenue for this row, so I'm going to click on that 284,000 number, and I'm going to divide that. By the sale price. So I'm taking the monthly revenue, how much money was made that month, dividing it by the cost of one item, and that will tell me when I press the enter key how many of those items were sold that month. So 825 items were sold in the month for this first row. I'm going to copy this formula down. I simply double-clicked on the fill handle, and that copied the number down, showing how many items were purchased for each item. Now that I have my number of items that are sold, I have the ability to now create the pivot table that will allow me to break down the items that are sold and see which items are selling more than others. Pivot tables are similar to subtotals, but they give you much more flexibility. Let's demonstrate the use of a pivot table. Clicking anywhere in the data, we're going to go to the Insert tab, Insert and Pivot Table. It will automatically select our range of data. We're going to place this pivot table in an existing worksheet because we already have a worksheet called Pivot Table down here. So I'm going to click on this little red arrow here, click on my pivot table, and click here on cell A8 and click OK. Now I need to tell Excel what I want in the pivot table. Well, one of the things that I want to have in my pivot table is I wish to know what type of item it is, whether it's for everyone, for men, women, or teen. And I also want to know the category of the item. And I want to know, ultimately, how many of those items were sold. So I've checked off type, category, and items sold. The pivot table has been created for me over here on the left, and I can now see that in the back country category there was 3,628 items sold. Camping, there was 1,208 items sold. So it has now broken those things down by category. But what if I wish to switch this around a little bit? I want to see which of these items were sold specifically for teens. Well, what I can do is I'm going to take this row that says type over here, and I'm going to drag this type up into the filters area. I'm going to click OK. Now, what I can do is I can click this drop down arrow where it says type, and I can specify now my teens. And I want to see how many items were sold that were made for teens, and click OK. Only one category item had teen sales, okay, that was the back country, and there was 2,151 items. Let's switch to a different category, clicking the drop down, and let's choose the men category, click OK. Here I've got a variety of category items that were sold specifically for men, and I can see the breakdown of those particular items. Changing now to women, I can see 2 category items were sold for women. Now, I can accommodate this same type of thing by bringing this type back down into the rows category, but this time we're putting the type underneath the category. Choosing my row labels, I can now choose to display just the men items. I click OK, and now I can see the categories that were specifically for men. Go back to my row labels. I now want to change the category to all. Click OK, and I see a much broader variety of this. Again, this is an introduction to pivot tables. Pivot tables allow me to analyze my data in great detail, and so using a pivot table is very useful in business for being able to analyze data because it allows me to very quickly and easily change my numbers around and choose what filters I wish to examine my sales by. I'm going to go back to my total inventory where I see my raw data displayed here, and that will allow us to go to our next topic. The last topic we're going to deal with is going to be dealing with securing a worksheet. And basically what this does is it allows you to lock down a worksheet to prevent people from being able to make changes to this particular worksheet. The way to do this is on the Format tab. If you click on the Format tab, there's an option that says Protect Sheet. If you click on Protect Sheet, here you can choose to allow people to select the unlocked cells or the locked cells. It also gives you the ability to enter in a password. Let's type in RBMA, all lowercase letters, RBMA, click OK, and RBMA again. Now our worksheet is protected. So while I can select items on the worksheet, if I try to type something, it won't let me type anything on this particular sheet. To unlock, also notice that at the top of the screen you will see that most of the items are grayed out because they can't be changed while the worksheet is protected. To unprotect a sheet that's been protected, we basically do the same steps. We're going to go to Format again. This time, what did say Protect Sheet now says Unprotect Sheet. So I click on Unprotect Sheet. I type in the RVMA that I typed in a moment ago, and that will allow the worksheet now to be unlocked and therefore changes made. In this particular lesson, we dealt with several things related to our data. We showed you how to freeze the panes so that the column labels at the top would stay on the screen at all times. That was in the View tab. We took a look at how to deal with subtotals if I wanted to subtotal my data. That was part of the Data tab. We also look at data validation, which also was on the Data tab, allowing me to limit what got typed into a cell. We looked at the if function, allowing us to create a function where Excel could do some thinking for us and decide whether or not that item needed to be ordered or not. We took a look at the pivot table, which did give us the ability to analyze the data in a very fine-tooth manner, using a lot of different options that were available to us, and we just took a quick look at pivot tables. And then we wrapped up the exercise by securing our worksheet and showing how you could lock down a particular sheet so that somebody couldn't make changes to that one sheet.